Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have this pretty long video for you here. It's just a follow along with me as I do my mannequin's hair. I got really bored during this lockdown and I just miss working with my hands. So yeah, this is my one-day journey of this really brassy blonde mannequin hair. Even in the sun, it makes her color look a lot warmer, but I would say she's starting off as a level 7, 8. So yeah, she's already a natural blonde to begin with. So it's not like I'm trying to lift her super high, which is fine with me because I'm working outside. So her foils aren't going to process the same way as they would as if she was inside. And also mannequin hair is just not the same as human hair, even if the manufacturers claim that the doll's hair is human. Honestly, I'm not even sure, but it doesn't process the same way. So then here you can see all the products I'm using. I'm using the Joico Verilight lightener. I believe they've reformulated and this is the old formula, so just beware. And the point of this video today is to test out that really funky looking weaving comb. So yeah, I like to mix my lightener with a ratio of roughly 1 to 1.5. So it gets this kind of like almost icing consistency. So again, this comb that I got was off of Amazon. It came in a set of 4. This is supposed to help you weave. So you can see here I'm putting the hair into the comb and taking it out. It does get stuck, but that was honestly the first time ever I had used it and tried it. So you can see that it separates the hair and it just, I guess, creates like a low light and the highlight. It saves time, I guess that's the intent of it. So I go through the entire mannequin's head using this comb for the first time, and I just wanted to get a feel for it. After having done that, honestly, I can say that I enjoy this comb for what it is. It does help you highlight faster, but as you can see from the teeth, it's not gonna get really fine weaves or anything. Like, I wouldn't say that you'd be able to get any baby lights. So then now I'm just using my Framar Big Daddy brush because it's nice and wide and it can cover the whole section of hair in terms of like the width. And starting at the back of the nape, and I like to start a little bit lower, maybe like an inch away from the scalp, and then work my way up. The way that I foil is generally I like to put the majority of the product on at the bottom, saturate the ends, and then work on my blends once the saturation is to my liking. And yeah, it's really funny watching this footage back because you can see just how windy of a day it is and I was really fighting against the elements. But because this is a mannequin and she doesn't have any body heat, I'm starting with 20 vol. Yes, she's already blonde. If this was a real life client who was already blonde, I probably would even start with 10 vol, maybe even 7 vol if I was using like Schwarzkopf Blonde Me, for example. But because I didn't have that available, I'm just using the Joico, but I'm using 20 vol because, like I said, there is no body heat and it's a cold, windy day, so that's gonna really affect my processing time as well. In terms of my sectioning, all I did was section her off into the 4 quadrants. When it comes to balayage and highlighting or anything like that, I generally like to keep it easy, keep it simple. So at the back of the neck or the nape area, I generally always do like a V shape going up, like following the hairline. So this is where you would have to cater to your specific client's needs. So if she was a blonde naturally, I find that a lot of natural blondes, they like to have a lot of brightness around their hairline, and especially if they say that they are very athletic or they like to tie their hair up a lot, pay very close attention to their hairline. And you could even just baby light around her entire hairline before you start following what I'm doing here. So because she's a mannequin and I'm just really doing this for like demonstration purposes, I'm okay with leaving a lot more natural dimension in. So just take into account your clients and what their intended result is, because a lot of clients, I find that they want to be really, really bright and they end up wanting a more solid look. So what I'm doing is deliberately a more dimensional look. And one thing to note is that because I am working outside with the wind and everything, it is another added challenge. So getting like super neat sections and making sure that my saturation is perfect with like really baby fine sections, it just wasn't in the cards for me because I just didn't feel like being outside for 8 hours that day. But yeah, this was really more of just for me to test out this comb to see if it really does weave. And I found that towards the end of my foiling process, I actually got the hang of it and the comb was getting stuck in the hair a lot less. So that was really great. And this is really more just a way for me to give you guys some pointers for doing balayage. So I'm doing a really generic foiling pattern. This is what I kind of fell back on a lot in hair school, obviously with some changes and some tweaks to improve it. So one of my most common mistakes in hair school was that I would foil every single foil the exact same way. So we were taught to paint W's and V's, which are great, but you do have to change it up. So every foil should not be brought up to the exact same plane. So if you're gonna bring one foil up really, really high, close to her scalp, maybe the next one do it a little bit lower. By doing that, you're adding variation to the natural and the lightened hair. So you're creating more of a contrast between natural and light, because both of those colors need each other in order to pop. So you want that contrast. So even though she's already a natural blonde, maybe what I'm playing with here is more so tones rather than depth. If she was, say, a natural level 4 instead of a natural level 7, you would see a much higher contrast. So for our clientele in the salon, a lot of our clients have really, really dark, coarse, thick hair. You would have to take baby fine sections to ensure that the hair is lifting evenly. Because she's already a natural blonde, I can get away with taking thicker sections. So if you were paying attention to the way that I was foiling the previous foil compared to this one, you can see that I'm painting this foil lower. I'm leaving a bit more depth closer to her root. And here I'm almost trying to paint a V shape. It's funny because you do have to put some thought into it, but my best advice that I can give you is to not overthink it. So you want to create a pattern that feels organic. Sometimes I find that if I purposely count and try to alternate my sections, it can come off quite robotic looking too. So honestly, just go with the flow. If you want to put 2 high foils and then 1 low one and then go back and forth, that can work. Just do whatever feels right to you and whatever you think will give you the desired look that your client had asked for. The main point is that you don't want to do every single foil the same and bring it up to the exact same place, because even if your blends are on point, you're still gonna end up with overall a straight line, almost like a straight line of demarcation between the natural hair and the lightened hair. So even if you can blend it out with toner, you're still going to lose out on a lot more natural dimension by bringing up everything to the exact same height as each other. So really pay attention to that and just kind of go with the flow. Just make sure that you're changing it up every once in a while. Another habit that I've changed since I left hair school is that I like to fold my foil backwards over the comb instead of forward, because in case the foil slips down a little bit, I still have the foil underneath that I folded over to kind of act as a barrier. Because what you don't want is to have the bleach kind of bleeding out over the top and creating bleed marks onto her natural color. Because she's a blonde, it's not going to be as obvious, but if your client was a natural level 4 or darker, it's going to be incredibly obvious that there's bleed marks. Yes, you can fix it with toner later with a root smudge, but you are creating extra work for yourself. So just be mindful of how high you're bringing your bleach and just allow the bleach to expand. I know that I'm working outside and it's cold, so it's not gonna expand a lot in the same way, just like how I'm actually worried that it might not even process at all. So by the time I finished foiling, I ended up bringing the entire setup inside, and I even put some heat on the foils just to make sure that it was processing, because I wasn't trying to lift her like 9 levels lighter or anything, but I did need at least some lightness, and I was happy to report that yeah, it did end up working for me despite working outside in the cold. And the reasoning for me working outside is just simple. My parents didn't want to have the chemicals and the bleach inside, which is fair. So anyone who lives with their parents will understand exactly what I'm talking about. Another struggle that I used to have in hair school was getting kind of like a warm area where I would be feathering the bleach upwards towards the scalp. The reasoning for that is just saturation, because if you're going from a lot of bleach on the ends of your hair and you're using that same amount of bleach and feathering it up, you're not getting any extra product, and the thinner amount of product towards the top is going to create that warmth. So what I like to do is actually take a little bit more bleach, put it maybe a centimeter or so below where I actually want it, and then I blend upwards and feather that way. By doing that, I ensure that whatever area that I'm feathering in has enough saturation so that it can avoid that warmth. Especially if you're working with a bleach that gets really hot, say for example the Schwarzkopf Blonde Me, that's a really good bleach because it conducts a lot of heat and it lifts the hair a lot. So if you're using a really powerful bleach like that, just be mindful of how much it expands, but you can use that to your advantage, because when the bleach expands, it means more coverage and it means more of the hair is gonna get lightened, obviously. So here for my foiling pattern, once I've reached the crown area, I have a little triangle shape. So in that case, I like to foil just straight across in one foil. Towards the top part of this section, it will get wider and wider. So what I like to do is just continue on in the one foil width, and whatever hair doesn't fit in that foil on the two sides, I'll leave them out. And then once I'm done this section, I'll actually go back and do a really deep tease and just paint the ends. By doing that, I'm creating more lightness at the top part of her hair, like around the crown area, but then just on the sides of it, you have brighter pieces that come down a little bit lower. By doing that, I'm ensuring that I'm not gonna get a harsh line of demarcation, and I'm gonna get better, I guess, just overall a better blend. It's not gonna look as calculated. So as you can see here, at the top part of her crown, there's two really deep teases. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. Once I finish the back, I like to section off my front face framing pieces or my money piece. It could be called either or, but I like to create a triangle section just like that for her face frame. I wouldn't recommend doing a face frame on anyone that has a deep side part. I feel like that could look pretty awkward. So only do this or I would only recommend this on someone who has a center parting or a slightly off center parting. A deep side part I wouldn't recommend for it because it could just look kind of weird and throw off the balance of the color. So for this triangular section, I know that I'm going to divide it out into smaller sections because obviously that's way too big of a section to just create one big chunk of blonde. So what I like to do is do a fine slice right at the hairline. So now this mannequin is a little different because she doesn't have any baby hairs. Normally, like on a regular human, they would have thinner hairs around their face. So you would be kind of forced to do a baby light to ensure that you're gonna get maximum lift. But because the mannequin just has the same hair density all around her head, this section is gonna look a lot thicker than it normally would. But all I'm doing is just kind of saturating the entire slice. I didn't backcomb at all, so I'm basically treating this as though it was a regular traditional highlight. And I'm bringing it up all the way to the root just because it's a face frame and I want maximum lightness. I can always bring it down with toner afterwards. I can always root smudge it or anything. So then now for the second section in this little triangle, I am gonna weave it out. As you can see, I tried to weave it with the comb, but it didn't really work out because the comb left out too much hair and I wanted to create a finer weave, so I had to manually go in and do it myself. So I feel like that's the one shortcoming of this comb, but I mean, I'm willing to take that. It's not that bad at all. So I did a more shallow tease and I'm bringing up the bleach pretty high as well. By teasing it just a little bit, I am leaving a little bit more of the natural color in there, just so that we don't get a huge chunky block of blonde at the very front. Some people want that and some people don't, so just pay attention to whatever style it is that your client prefers. So now for the last section in this triangle, I'm doing a very deep tease, meaning I'm starting the tease near the very ends of her hair because you can see it created a lot more of a hairball on the top of her head. That's a deep tease. By doing that, I'm leaving even more natural depth in the hair, and this is just going to help break up that solidness in the very front. After doing the face frame, you would move on to the sides, and what I like to do on the sides is follow the head shape or the hairline. So because the mannequin has a pretty severe angle at the front of her hairline, I'm just going to follow it, and that's what I tried to show here. Just like I said before, she doesn't have any baby hairs, so this section is a lot thicker than it normally would be, and I'm trying to get maximum tension under the hair and put the foil tight up underneath it. By doing that, you're ensuring that the bleach can get as high up as possible on the head, and you don't want to create any bleed marks, so you do want to allow yourself a little bit of room for the bleach to expand upwards. You don't want to have it bleed and create any kind of mess. However, I knew that the likelihood of this bleach expanding was really low because I'm working outside and it's cold and it's windy. I've said this a million times already, it feels like. So normally, under normal circumstances, I probably would have left more room for it to expand. Okay, so continuing on. The first section that I didn't backcomb at all, and following the face frame, the exact same pattern, the second foil, I'm now backcombing to create a little bit more depth and variation. As I proceed and continue up toward the top of the head in this side section, I'll eventually start to pivot away from such a severe angle to more of a straight angle. I'm still going to follow the same pattern. It's still going to be diagonal back, but essentially what I'm doing is just kind of pivoting up away from the ear. So So it's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see once all the foils are done, because I only want the first 2 foils near the hairline to be that severe of an angle. Everything else is going to be a little bit more straight. And then I didn't show it here either, but I tipped out the ends with clay lightener. I didn't show it only because I had never done it before and I was just experimenting and I wanted to see how it turned out. So I may or may not do this again in the future, we'll really see, but I don't want to spread any kind of like wrong information about clay lightener or anything like that. This was literally my first time ever using it. After processing, I washed out her hair with just shampoo and then I detangled. Now I'm starting off with toner. For toners for balayage, I will generally always start with the root color or the root smudge, just because I want to make sure that it stays on the longest amount of time. By doing that, I'm ensuring that the root will be the darkest part of the hair color. It's more acceptable to have a darker root and lighter ends instead of lighter root and darker ends. So as you can see, I'm going in with a root and applying it just like I would for a regular root touch-up. And the brush that I'm using is from our Emperor brush. It's one of my favorite for this kind of application because it has the brush on one side and a comb on the other. So I don't need to have a separate color comb ready. I can just brush it down whenever I'm ready to. The color that I'm using is just an ashy level 7 for the root, and then on her ends I actually used a mix of a 9 violet and a 9 ash gloss. By doing that, I'm gonna ash out the yellow pigment that you see. Unfortunately, this footage was taken during the sunset, so the color looks extremely yellow and it looks almost as if I hadn't done anything at all. So you'll see in pictures either on my Instagram or at the end of this video the actual finished product in natural lighting. But yeah, you can see that I'm just applying the root color the way that I would for a touch-up. The only difference is that when I do the front, I'm leaving the face frame out. By leaving the face frame out, I'm ensuring that it stays on for the shortest amount of time and therefore is going to be the lightest strand of hair. So exactly the opposite of what I said about the root. I want the root to be the darkest, but I want the face frame to be the lightest, so I'm leaving it out and doing it last. Everyone has a slightly different way of doing the root touch-up. Just do it however feels right to you. I like to go on an angle at the back and then a diagonal back angle at the front. And by doing that, I kind of create almost like a teardrop shape for a balayage. So usually any balayage that has a face frame, I like to keep most of the brightness at the front of the hair, like where the client's face is, and then as I work towards the back of the hair, the root will gradually go a little bit lower. There is so much variation as to how to do a root smudge because it really depends on the look that you want and what the client wants. A lot of our girls that want to be super light and super blonde, they want the tiniest micro root so that it can grow out nicely, but they can still be very, very blonde. So it's completely up to the client and the desired look overall. So here you can see after I applied the root color, I'm going in with the gloss. So because she's a blonde, I generally always use demi-permanent colors on blondes. So that means they're a little bit more gentle because blondes typically have finer hair and they can't really be pushed as much as coarse, maybe like ethnic hair, like coarse Asian hair can withstand a lot more bleach and a lot more lightening, whereas girls that are naturally blonde, you do have to be a lot more gentle. So I like to use demi colors for it, or just generally glosses. You can use glosses on coarser, thicker hair as well, but I find that the retention is just not as good. Whereas on blondes, you almost kind of have to be gentle, whereas on coarser hair, that's been lightened a lot, you almost need something stronger. So sometimes I can even go in with a permanent to tone that kind of hair. But for now, I'm using a gloss, and like I said previously, I'm using a mix of a violet and an ash tone. So the ash tone, I believe, is more so of a beigey color, and then the violet color is like a super ashy color. So violet, for those of you who don't know, neutralizes yellow, which is why there's things like purple shampoo to help blondes neutralize brassiness. It's just color theory, and it kind of tricks the eye into seeing a more desirable shade. So for me, I love ash tones as well, but I don't like going in with pure ash. Even if I'm trying to create an ashy hair color overall, I still like to use a little bit of a beigey color just so that the hair still looks reflective, because I find that anytime I go in with a pure violet tone or like a just straight up ashy color, like really ashy color, I find it ends up looking very dull and very matte, which I mean is a look in and of itself, and it's a different story if the client specifically asks for it. But I find that a lot of clients, they actually want to be blonde and they want to be bright, but they don't want to be yellow. So in order to avoid that, you need a little bit of beige at least. Some people will even use gold. That is completely up to you and how you formulate. And if you want, at another date, I can try to come up with a video on how I like to formulate, but there's no one size fits all formula. After applying the toner everywhere else, I'll apply it on the face frame. Just like I said, I'm doing the face frame very last, and I use my gloves to kind of blend the transition or the root color and the end color together. By blending with your hands and your comb, you're making sure that you're gonna get a nice even kind of color melt as opposed to a harsh line of demarcation. You're not gonna see a darker blonde and then like a lighter blonde right underneath it. You want to create the blend and marry the two colors together. So what I'm doing here is cross-checking my initial root application, and I'm going through with the comb and combing it down. By combing it down, I'm creating more of a melt, and I'm really making sure that there's a good blend. By cross-checking your root color, you're also making sure that you get full coverage at the root. So this would be more noticeable if you were using a darker color if the client had naturally darker hair, but because I'm using a level 7, you are able to see a darker root color, but it's not a dramatic change. It's not a huge contrast. So for cross-checking, just go on the opposite angle of whatever you did your initial application on. So at the front, I went almost on a horizontal. So now I'm doing a vertical. And by doing it this way, I'm combing all the hair back away from the client's face so that when she's processing, all of the hair is away from her face and I can clean up around the hairline really neatly and she doesn't have to sit there with color processing on her face, right? And if this was a normal client as well, I would highly suggest using a foil or some sort of physical barrier for the money piece or the face frame, because you don't want that just hanging in front of her face, because clients they don't like having stuff in their face and then they might be tempted to kind of play with it. Just no, deter that. So get a physical barrier like a foil or something, and also it prevents any kind of dark marks from the darker root shade from getting on the very front money piece. So protect the money piece, get a foil for it. When it comes to glosses, I find that more is more. I am really extra when it comes to my saturation because I want to make sure that the product gets everywhere. So you'll see that it actually started to kind of foam up a little bit and turn white. It doesn't really deter me So I'm just gonna keep using all the product that I can because I want to make sure that the hair is 100% saturated. Even if it's dripping on the ground, I don't care as long as the hair is covered, because in my opinion, that's just how I make sure I get even color. So now for the face frame, again, I'm just double checking it and I'm going back and forth between combing out the color and smudging it. And then here you can see that I tried to show off the toner, and you can see that it is neutralizing the yellow even in this sunset lighting, which I'm really sorry for, by the way, but you can see that the yellow is neutralizing and it's becoming more of a beige tone even as it's processing. So here you can see the color that I used. I used the Oligo Pro Colura gloss, and yeah, this is the finished result. Again, I'm so sorry I had to take this under the sunset lighting, so that's why you'll see a little bit of like an orange kind of tone to it, even though it's not orange. So I took better photos of the hair the very next day. You can see it here and you can see it on my Instagram. Please follow me there for more hair content, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!